So you've been perusing the MMORPG market looking for something new, and you tried Guild Wars 2 a long time ago, but it was meh, because really there wasn't much to do at Endgame and you were a little disappointed. So you went back to being chastised for every single mistake that you make in every League of Legends match you've ever played on a daily basis. That was very specific. Well, it turns out that words can hurt, and somehow you were banned from every IHOP in the western section of Canada. But nevertheless, you decided to take an extra look at Guild Wars 2, and you are completely lost. There is a literal plethora of new features, new endgame modes, and collections, and more, and it is stressing you the heck out. Well, that's where I'm gonna help you. I'm going to cover every single thing that you can do in Guild Wars 2 Endgame and what they are good for. And don't worry, there are no spoilers here. So let's start by looking at the PvE Endgame modes that are available for you to get into. So let's get started with the simplest one, which is of course Open World or Story. Open World, of course, is the exploration of Guild Wars 2, and it is usually best in either a solo fashion or in small grouped content. These have everything from finding secret jumping puzzles, working on world completion, which is a collection bit that I'll talk about later, and even the zone-wide meta events that require a mass amount of players to join together and take down some pretty gnarly foes. There is tons of small features or hidden gems in here for you to find, and it is actually very relaxing and soothing. Story is the other half of this whole PvE adventure that you can play through, usually solo. Of course, it being the main story of Guild Wars 2, and of course this includes their Living World seasons, which is the DLC mini-stories that bridge together the major expansion. Most of these DLC stories take you to new zones, they have unique features or currencies, and are actually pretty well self-contained. The most notable feature of the open world, as well as Living World Season 4 specifically, is that you can gain access to mounts, and that is probably the best feature of Path of Fire. Just gonna shout out there. Now let's go ahead and take a look at Fractals. Fractals are essentially mini dungeons that have their own specific story and environment. These mini dungeons scale upwards in difficulty levels all the way up to level 100, and this is increased up to that 100 mark every time that you complete a fractal at or above your current level. Of course, the higher you climb into these fractals, the better the loot and the more frequent the rewards are. These higher levels, however, start incorporating a new affect called Agony. To combat this, we utilize Agony Resistance, which is from certain infusions that we can slot our gear with to reduce the damage we take. For example, if you are at fractal level 100 with 0 Agony Resistance, every time that you are struck by an enemy and agony is inflicted on you, Agony will deal 180% of your maximum health in a single tick. Usually, you work your way up the difficulty scale, starting to incorporate some Agony Resistance into your gear to allow you to climb higher. This, of course, works best with a dedicated group, and the biggest thing that you can earn from Fractals, in my opinion, is the Ascended Gear, which offers some of the highest stat values possible in Guild Wars 2 and is somewhat comparable to Legendary Gear in that aspect. You will need Ascended Gear to climb higher in Fractals because only Ascended Gear or Legendary Gear are capable of utilizing Agony Infusions, which increase your Agony Resistance, so keep that in mind. Aside from that, Fractals offer incredible gold farms and even a collection piece for a legendary backpack. Now let's go ahead and talk about strike missions. Strike missions are single boss encounters that require a squad of 10 players to accomplish, although technically if you're skilled you can fudge that with a little less than 10. Some strike missions vary in difficulties, such as End of Dragon strikes have a normal mode and have challenge mode, whereas the Ice Brood Saga strikes only really have the normal mode. These challenge modes have essentially become the pinnacle of PvE difficulty in the game, with some bosses requiring weeks of attempts to overcome. These boss fights can offer some incredible rewards, such as crafting materials or even ascended armor and weapons. And there are constantly groups coming together on a daily basis to enjoy a quick few bosses for some great loot. As a note, it does appear that the future of Guild Wars 2 is focusing on strikes as their main form of PvE content, so if you enjoy them, you're gonna have a great time. Lastly, on the PvE side, let's talk about raiding. Raiding was introduced into Guild Wars 2 during the Heart of Thorne's expansion and was considered at the time the greatest addition to their endgame. Raiding has the same idea as strike missions, but it has around 3 bosses in each of the 7 wings. These bosses have many more mechanics and usually higher health pools, and even to this day still require quite a bit of practice and patience to handle. Luckily, there are many groups called raid training groups that look to encourage newer players to try raiding and learn the fight so that they may enjoy this pillar of endgame content. Recently, ArenaNet added the Emboldened mode, which empowers one of the 7 raid wings and grants players increasing health, damage, and healing output per failed attempt on a boss. When the players down the boss, their counter is then reset to 0, and this continues again if they are struggling with the next. This has greatly improved the outlook on the raiding community and allows players to incorporate raiding into their day-to-day gameplay. Raiding in Guild Wars 2 can offer some of the easiest ascended gear sets that you can acquire, but these start the path to unlock legendary armor. Legendary armor has the same stats as ascended gear, but it allows the player to change those stats without penalty, remove any infusions or runes without penalty, and even gives access to that legendary piece to all other characters on the account who can use that armor tier. So if you earn a piece of legendary gear on your elementalist, that means that your necromancer can use that same piece. What do you think about Guild Wars 2 future in Endgame? Tell me in the comments section down below. Personally, I'm excited for the emphasis on strike missions. I love strike missions. So let's go over into the PvP realm, specifically the structured PvP. Glorious combat against other players. It's fantastic. So structured PvP, you can play literally at level 2 and enjoy everything that your account has access to. If your account has access to all the expansions, you can play every elite specialization in the game in PvP without having to go through the hero points to unlock them. PvP stats are also normalized here through their amulet system. Also, all players, if not already max level, get boosted to level 80 while in structured PvP. These amulets dictate how your character will perform, and you can customize further with your weapon choices, your sigils, the elite specializations, utility skills, and more. The combinations are endless. This game mode is incredibly fun. I promise you, it is worth the time. Most matches here operate on the Conquest game mode, which is essentially capture and hold specific zones to generate points for your team to win. This is essentially all that you will see in ranked game modes, and of course, each of the Conquest maps has some type of unique feature that is integral to that particular match. Structured PvP is also great to test out how other professions will play in the game, so keep that in mind. PvP offers some incredible rewards through their ranked matchmaking system, which includes the materials used to purchase ascended gear, which can then be turned into legendary gear, which operates the same way that legendary gear does from raiding. This is also another place that you can earn a legendary backpack. You get some cool titles, and can even gather rare crafting materials just by passively playing. 10 for 10 would recommend. The other PvP mode is called World vs. World, which is, and I will continue to say, the Wild West of PvP. You enter into these zones with whatever gear you have on your back, and you work with hundreds of other players to gain control of these map zones. This also means that there are hundreds of other players on the enemy team who want to put you down. Combat here goes from small 1 vs. 1s or duels to skirmishes, all the way to massive balls of death and enemies clashing together. There are many different ways of playing World v World, and they're absolutely all valid. Personally, I have the most fun running as a solo player and picking off other solo enemies. I like dueling. These enemies are from 2 other servers that your server is contesting with within that time period, and depending on how coordinated you and your server are, can dictate how well you do here. ArenaNet is working on incorporating this game mode into the guild versus guild style of combat, where your large guild, regardless if the players are even on the server, can combat another guild for dominance of the mists. Pretty awesome. Oh, did I mention castle sieges? Literally, you can break down and destroy castles, forts, and gain their resources in that section of the map. It's awesome. World vs. World has some great rewards, as well as both Ascended and Legendary gear. You can also gain access to the World vs. World specific mount in the War Claw. It's pretty damn cool. If you're enjoying Guild Wars 2 and you know it, hit the like. If you're enjoying Guild Wars 2 and you know it, hit subscribe. Listen, I have 3 kids basically under the age of 5. You gotta cut me some slack. Finally, let's talk about the other non-traditional endgame activities that you can get into. First, I would be chastised if I didn't mention it, but fashion. Fashion is basically finding the right gear with the right affects and the right infusions to make your character pop. Literally, players will work tirelessly to earn single pieces of gear that will make their look perfect with their setup. There are whole groups and guilds of other people looking for the right fashion for their characters. Of course, collections in every way is a massive part of Endgame. The biggest part, of course, is the legendary collecting, as many of the legendary weapons require you to complete all activities in the core Tyria for the world completion. There are now 3 legendary versions of each of the weapon styles available in-game on top of the legendary gear you can gain from the endgame modes. There are also certain collections that tie into completing specific achievements, which has to be mentioned here. The achievement hunters look for all sorts of unique and small tasks that you can accomplish, and you don't really have any other bearing other than show off your amazing skill. Of course, there are the RP guilds out there if you would like to become completely engrossed in the realm of Tyria. Personally, I haven't run into too many of these, but I have heard of them. And the last bit that I would like to talk about is the mount racing guilds, or the mount guilds, we'll say. The biggest one that you'll find are the Griffon flyers that get together and find incredibly difficult tracks to fly and traverse that take precision flying and incredible skill. I've also heard of some roller beetle guilds that race all over Tyria and create crazy tracks and drift. It's crazy fun. So yeah, there you go. That is a complete picture of the endgame in Guild Wars 2. If you want to see what I wish I knew before starting Guild Wars 2, click this video here. Stay caffeinated, folks.